This time next week, the people of Britain will head to the polls to vote for their next Prime Minister. The latest poll has found the Reform UK party holds a narrow lead over the Tories. According to the Redfield and Wilton survey, Nigel Farage's party is 1 point ahead of the Tories on 19%. Joining us from London is finance and geopolitics expert Dr Roger Gewolb. Dr Roger Gewolb, great to be with you. What do you make of this polling? Is it accurate, and can I get your feeling on the ground?
They're saying that these new polls, these MRP polls that they've started using, Gabriella, are far more accurate than old polls for two reasons, I think. First of all, the scientific techniques, which I'm sure must include some element of AI, artificial intelligence. And secondly, the samples are much, much larger. I mean, the usual polls in the UK by the major polling companies are 1,000, 2,000. I think I've seen very rarely 3,000, 4,000 people. This latest poll is apparently 19,000 souls voting. So they're supposed to be much more accurate. They predict that it will be a Labour landslide with 450 seats for Labour, about 60 for the Tories, the Conservatives. The opposition party will be 70-odd seats. Nigel Farage's Reform Party will actually have 18 seats. It's the biggest wipeout of the Tories since 1900, but they do caution that things can change. And for example, tonight we had the final debate between Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer for 75 minutes. And Sunak seems to have done better, although I was just amazed. Aren't people incredible at how they just didn't answer questions? They just obfuscated and skirted the answers, and yet the studio audience was applauding them. The hostess tried to nail them, but they wouldn't answer.
I think if you're a good politician these days, you just have to master spin. If you can avoid answering questions, then people applaud you. That seems to be the case. As you say, it's widely expected that the Conservative Party will lose at this general election. So what does the future look like for the Tories and Reform UK after July 4?
I think that the future for the Tories, I mean, their goose is cooked. I don't think they'll come back. I was saying the audience applauds, and you were saying, yeah, that's what happened. But I mean, they may applaud, but I don't think anybody's buying this stuff. You know, they really don't. I think the Tories will all but disappear for some years. It could be decades. It could be generations. They've really done everything they could to implode, to the point where I get emails and posts telling me nobody can be this stupid. This is some kind of a plot. This is some kind of conspiracy to sink themselves and bring the country, I mean, I don't know, from Mars or something. It's incredible stuff. But I think they're gone. The Reform Party, I think, is going to have a difficult time because even with their 18 seats, our first past the post system means that only the Tories or Labour can really get in power. So Reform is going to sit there, and as much as Nigel would like to be the opposition, this poll said the opposition will be, with 70-odd seats, the Liberal Democrats. So I think Reform is just kind of going to sit there. It's pretty bleak, and therefore I am issuing a press release in the morning reminding people basically that last week, on British breakfast and Sunday politics television programs, I made the proposal that the Tory party should admit defeat and hand the keys to Nigel and the Reform and let them take over, let Reform merge into the Tories, and together they could actually defeat Labour. I mean, it's very wild. It probably won't happen, but I have had a groundswell of people telling me, go, Roger, go. I mean, such an amazing amount of support for that idea, because it's our last chance before we fall into what they're calling Starmergeddon.
Have you spoken to Nigel Farage about this? How does he feel about taking over the Tories?
I haven't. I WhatsApp Nigel, and he usually answers me quickly, but I'm still WhatsApping him, but I haven't heard back from him. I imagine, and mutual, people who know us both have said to me, he's probably getting 10,000 WhatsApps and 100,000 emails a day, and I doubt he or any of the Reform High Command, really have a chance to read anything. But he's probably heard of what I'm doing. I don't know whether he approves or not, but I'm just doing this because even though it's kind of dramatic, albeit pragmatic, I want it on record. If we end up, in the next 5 or 10 years in misery, I want it on record that there was an option available, but our political leaders didn't explore it.
So next election, as Nigel Farage is kind of creating this momentum now for potentially running again next time around, do you see him being the leader of Reform UK, or do you see him taking over the Tories?
Yeah, that's a big point, and I'm not sure that Nigel is happy with me for what I've said, but I basically said I don't see either of those. I'm sorry. One journalist has called me the irrepressible Dr. Roger Gewolb, but I have to say what I think. I think that Nigel is going to have a very difficult time building tiny reform into the opposition when it's already the Lib Dems. But as far as taking over the Tories, I really don't think he or anybody else that breathes could work with the people running the Tory party and telling them how to change it and letting them let me lead. I just don't think he'd sit for 5 years and stand for that. I don't think anybody would. I certainly wouldn't. I think he will go to America and work with Donald Trump, where he's a media star as well as here, and he can have a wonderful life and wonderful career. I just don't think anybody could stand 5 years of watching Labor do what everybody fears they're going to. Well, not everybody, not their supporters, but what people who don't support them, which apparently is a large number of people, are going to do to this country, because we already see it. Increased tax beyond the highest taxes we've had in 70 years, increased immigration, back to the EU after reverse Brexit in all but name. A lot of things that, many people don't want. And I don't think Nigel could just sit there, or I certainly couldn't. I don't think anybody could just sit there, watch that all happen and try to reverse it all on their own, especially with the Tories, who hate him and wouldn't let him do anything anyway. That's why they need to give him the keys right now, or go out of existence.
Well, it's an interesting point, and we'll look at what's been dominating the headlines in the lead up to this election, and it's really been a betting scandal. A Conservative politician has become the 5th party figure to be investigated by the gambling watchdog for allegedly placing a suspicious bet on the general election date. Look, is this taking away from the important conversation around the key issues?
No, the latest is the Labor guy who laid a bet against himself.
Right.
He bet that he would lose.
Well, either way, what does it tell you about politicians and the people the people in the UK are funding?
Yeah, absolutely. It tells us what our current class of politicians is like, which is rubbish. And you could see it.
Is that worldwide or just in the UK?
I did an interview with Nigel Farage some months ago. If you want to Google my surname and his, you'll see the interview where I said, why do we have such bad politicians in the West all over the place? And he answered it with some very interesting answers, which are in that video, which you can see, and I'll touch on in a second. But to answer your question about the effect, you just had to watch tonight's debate, Gabriella. So much time was taken up talking about this betting stuff when they should have been discussing the issues of vital, of crucial concern to this country. I mean, enough already. It was just terrible watching that.
Why do we have such, I can't remember the word you described it, but essentially awful, rubbish was the word, rubbish politicians in power? Why is it? Do people not care about the country? Do they care about themselves?
Yes, yes, and yes. I asked Nigel, and he said, it is because we used to have politicians who had made it on their own. Truman, Eisenhower, Trump, Berlusconi, people who had accomplished something in life and wanted to put something back. And they didn't need the approbation of the public. They'd already made their spurs. Whereas today, almost across the board, almost in every nation, we have professional politicians who put their career first. And that's what it's all about. And they have no experience. They don't understand what the people want. And everything is about them maintaining power and getting reelected. That's why we're where we are, he said.
I want to talk to you about what's been happening in Israel. Israel's Supreme Court has ruled unanimously that ultra-Orthodox seminary students must be drafted into the military. So this ends their long-standing exemptions after a legal arrangement allowing the practice expired. Look, I was just in Israel and this was a big sticking point for people there while everyone else had to watch their brother and sister, their daughter, their son go off to war. What's your assessment of this decision?
Well, these are long-standing issues. And of course, besides the ultra-Orthodox, the 21% of the Israeli population that are Israeli Arabs are also not required to serve, but nobody's making an issue out of that. Some do serve, actually. Many of them do serve, but much of the 21% of the Arab Israeli population of Israel is not required to serve in the army. And the ultra-Orthodox Jews are not required to serve in the army. And their argument is twofold. One argument is that if they were exposed to the army, they'd be exposed to, people of the opposite sex, because, of course, both men and women, boys and girls serve in the Israeli army. They'd be exposed to members of the opposite sex or same sex, whatever. And music and dancing and alcohol and all the things they're not supposed to do, which would take away from their religious Torah studies. And the other argument, of course, on the part of these ultra-Orthodox, terribly religious people is that Israel is alive and what it is today because of the devotion of these people to constant study of the Torah, the holy scriptures, and that mustn't be interrupted with it. I don't think many Israelis would disagree with that part, but it is getting sort of tense, and it provides a real problem for Netanyahu because he's got two factions of his coalition who are these ultra-Orthodox sects. So it's raised its head by this Supreme Court judgment ruling right in the middle of the negotiations to draft a new bill. The conscription bill has expired, and they were going to come up with a new bill which solved this problem. But before they could, the court issued this ruling, has thrown it all into disarray and put pressure on Netanyahu, made it very difficult to hold his coalition together. So I don't know how it's going to turn out, but the real issue is the military needs more people.
Yeah.
It's got 2 wars going on, and maybe things need to change. That's the attitude.
I want to ask you about Julian Assange. He has arrived home in Australia for the first time in 15 years. What does his future look like? Are we going to see more secrets being exposed?
I don't know. I've been on a lot of programs about Julian Assange. I mean, first of all, I'm pleased that he was freed. The poor guy has suffered enough. Good grief. And the big debate is, will he go back to leaking and publishing information? I mean, I think given the politicians we were just talking about and all the scandal and skullduggery and criminal behavior and everything else going on, I mean, we certainly could use some leaks, Gabriella. So yeah. I don't know whether he'll settle in Australia and get active again. I have a feeling from the followers of his that I've come across on various television programs, that they're going to push him to do exactly that. Whether he's up for that with the health problems he's had and the years and the fact that he's now past his sell-by date as a leaker, as a publisher, but I mean, he could get right back into it tomorrow morning, I'm sure. And we could use some exposure of, because when he leaked, I don't think there was stuff going on in our political leaders as there is now.
Interesting point. Well, we'll have to watch this space very closely. We are less than 24 hours away from the first US presidential debate, Donald Trump versus Joe Biden. Have you got the popcorn ready? Are you excited? Is it going to be a disappointment? What's your assessment?
Yeah, I mean, I'm on some very big programs, on some very big networks, minutes after the debate ends, talking about it tomorrow, Friday morning. And I've got the popcorn. I'm very excited. I'm wondering, Sleepy Joe did hold his own on the State of the Union message, but I just don't know how he's going to hold his own on this debate. Trump has been refining his strategy and his message over the last week or two very carefully. And I mean, it should be quite a show. Now, it should certainly put Sunak and Starmer, who were so boring. I mean, my wife was sitting there screaming, "Enough already! Shut up!" It should put them to shame, and it should be very interesting. I don't know who will win. I would imagine Trump, and then of course, a lot of commentators have said that if Joe does have what they call the quote senior moment unquote, that could be a huge game changer.
Yeah, well, he's had a few senior moments and it doesn't appear to be a game changer yet. We just keep seeing the one repeat, but we'll see if it makes any difference now that he's on a debate stage with Donald Trump. But Dr. Roger Gewolb, great to speak with you.
You too. Thank you, Gabriella.
Thank you.